Hello, listeners. I'm Timstradamus, and welcome back to another Hump Day. Joining me, as always, is my talented and beautiful co-hostess, Voyse.
Good morning, Timstradamus, and welcome to all of our listeners. I have a really interesting riddle. I have a name, but it isn't mine. You don't think about me while in your prime. People cry when I'm in their sight. Others lie with me all day and night. What am I?
Arthritis. Because I'm getting into my knees.
Oh my goodness. You sound older and older by the day.
I am getting that way.
But no, that's not the answer. I said Halloween-y.
That's pretty scary.
I guess it depends on your perspective there. Give up? If you want a little clue, it's also the brand of a pizza.
Cold Rocks? Cold Stone?
You're very close. It's actually a tombstone.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Well, for any new listeners out there, I enjoy scouring Reddit and bringing forward interesting, funny, and dramatic stories. And then I go ahead and I share it with everyone so that Damas and I can go ahead and share our perspectives, and we look forward to hearing yours.
Hear, hear.
Well, Damas, you know what day of the week it is?
Oh, that's right. Hydration Wednesday. Drink your water.
Drink it. It's healthy for you.
Please.
Well, as you go ahead and enjoy your water for the day, why don't we go ahead and delve into these stories? For any listeners wanting to follow along, all story links are in the description below. For our first story, am I the a-hole for getting my son a new babysitter for my weeks? My soon-to-be ex-wife and I have a 7-year-old son. Our son has had the same babysitter for the past year and a half, Abigail, 22. Abigail and her husband took in some family members' kids around the same age, and her husband works nights, so they're both home in the afternoons when Abigail has our son. Our son enjoys going there and playing with the kids, and having the husband teach him how to swim and play baseball. He's even claimed partial ownership over their dogs. While my wife and I were discussing custody, she told me she wants Abigail to watch her son on my weeks so he'll have some consistency. Normally, I'd be fine with that, but Abigail and my wife have gotten very close over the past year and a half. They meet for lunch at least every other week to catch up without the kids. They text nearly every day, and she's openly taking my wife's side in the divorce. I'm afraid that if Abigail has my son on my weeks, that she'll report everything back to my wife, or that she'll take my son to see my wife. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with her friend watching my son on my weeks, but if she wanted to have the same babysitter throughout, we could find someone else that we both agree on. My wife refused because she only trusts Abigail and thinks this is me retaliating because she was able to prevent my family from being alone with my son. I told her I still don't want to have Abigail watch my son on my weeks, and she's getting my son involved, asking if he wants to go with Abigail or get a new babysitter. Now my son is upset that he can't see Abigail on my weeks, and my wife is accusing me of being petty and harming our son despite her. Am I the a-hole?
Oh, my Lanta.
Now, I will say, I do have a lot of additional information from our OP, but it might drastically change your initial reaction to this story.
Pour it on me, baby.
So our OP says that his soon-to-be ex has prevented his family from not being able to be with his son during visits that are unsupervised, but that doesn't apply to her family, just his. However, we find out through the comment section from our OP, his son and nephew don't get along because apparently his soon-to-be ex and his sister hate each other. Redditors pushed, and OP admitted that his nephew is in the same class as his son and one of Abigail's kids. His nephew has ADHD and can be a little mean to his son and Abigail's kid. But let me go ahead and actually enlighten a little more from what OP says on what a little mean actually means. Some of the bullying by the nephew has been pulling hair, name calling, and hitting kids when they don't want to share or include him in games. Some specific actions by the nephew to the OP's son has been messing up his art projects and kicking him. Our OP's nephew has even gone so far as to cut the hair of one of Abigail's kids. And OP's excused that away by saying the hair thing happened once and it wasn't even my kid. OP also says that his sister has some mental health issues and she's being medicated for it. And OP has even said, more incriminating evidence against him, that he believes Abigail will inform his ex if he's late for pickups, comes without a booster seat because apparently his kid is tall and doesn't need one, or forgets to pack his son lunch. To which OP said that the school calls Abigail, and if she doesn't drop off a lunch for his son, the school gives his son an emergency lunch and then bills the parents later. And I have to wonder how many times this has happened. So that's just some of the comment section.
Well, he definitely paints a vivid picture of why some of the things that his soon-to-be ex-wife is kind of putting in place for their child. It makes sense to me. He never illuminates us on what it is his ex-family is, but he definitely tells us about his. And there's a lot there. I would also not feel comfortable without my child being somewhere unsupervised around people I know that have things going on.
That's putting it nicely.
So I can agree with that rule. The only reason why he wants his son to not be with the current babysitter, which I think is Abigail.
Correct.
Is because he thinks that she's going to tattle on him for all the bad things he does. So he doesn't like being held accountable, and he doesn't want someone to hold him accountable. Seems pretty petty and childish to me. That's really your only reason for wanting to make sure that your kid isn't in a comfortable and safe place with someone that he trusts, that he's already been going to for over a year, I believe.
A year and a half.
What are you doing? Can you not see the pettiness in your actions? I understand you guys are going through a divorce. I believe they are going through it, correct?
Correct. It's soon to be his ex.
I understand emotions can get very high, and maybe you're getting some information from family members that isn't so bright. But understand this, you need to put the safety of your child first. If he feels comfortable with Abigail, regardless of Abigail's relationship with your ex, that shouldn't really influence how you look at things. If you're messing up and not putting him in a booster seat when he needs to, if you're messing up because he's not coming to school when you have him for that week without lunch, that's on you. Understand, when people are just trying to make you a better parent and more aware of the situation, that's how you should take it. Not as you're going to tattle on me to my wife, so I'd rather have my son stay somewhere else for the week he's with me that could put him in harm's way or with some stranger I hardly know.
As we know, it's actually, and I hate to say this, scary to leave your kids with babysitters that you have not fully vetted out.
And if you're paranoid about having someone tattle on you, maybe you should just do the right things. At the end of the day, that's what this comes down to. You don't like being held accountable, OP. I hope people gave you some advice and perspective on this, though, because it could help you tenfold as far as parenting is concerned. Your kid's 7. You really shouldn't be forgetting lunches. And you really shouldn't be forgetting a booster seat while you're traveling. I'm not certain how long this has been going, but I got to believe that because you're so afraid of being held accountable on that it's happened repeatedly. You have some growing up to do, OP. Stop worrying about how you can make sure no one sees your mistakes and worry more about what situations my son's being put into because of my insecurities. You are an a-hole. I understand, though, you're going through a divorce. It's an emotionally tough time for everyone involved, including your son. You compounding that issue by taking him out of a place that he feels safe and that's consistent will only make things worse.
The consensus on Reddit is our OP is the a-hole. Now, I will say, and mind you, this was my perspective. At the beginning, when I initially read this, my thought was, is one parent trying to alienate a child from another parent?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, that happens a lot. I have even had to experience that with my parents splitting. And it's not a fun feeling to be in the middle of as a child. But man, when Redditors started asking those questions, all of the information that I provided you before really stamped down the verdict on them. For a lot of Redditors, it was all of the reasons that you've provided don't address that you're trying to take care of your son. Your focus has been what's best for me, not what's best for him. And because of that, I can tell you the comment section really did pull apart in undressing our OP. And they've tried to have some, I'm not sure if it's an explaining away of actions. Regardless, I understand that there are a lot of children that have to deal with ADHD. However, that doesn't make it okay for any child to get physical with another. And the fact that his nephew is essentially bullying his kid and other kids, and he's excusing that away, is not okay. The fact that his family has literally been barred from seeing his child unsupervised just goes to show you that there is some concerns for his safety. And then to also try and talk away doing the basic necessities for your child, something as simple as making sure that they leave with a lunch. Because truly, I can understand forgetting one time, but to have it be a reoccurring incident, that's something that you need to bring up, and that you know the process from the school, that the school will call an emergency backup, which is Abigail, and that if Abigail can't bring the lunch, then the school has to go ahead and charge the parents and then go ahead and give him an emergency lunch, that the school has a process for these reoccurring incidences that our OP is aware of. For me, shows the neglect of our OP in just being a base human to be a good parent. For me, it's baffling. Mind you, as I say, I try and keep an open mind because I do understand that emotions can be very high, especially when it comes to divorce. But gosh darn it, OP.
Gosh darn it.
You made yourself sound so bad. And I wish that there was at least some fabrication here to make himself sound better, but there's not.
At least he was honest about the whole thing.
That's very true.
Was he able to take the criticism?
No.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's, for me, the real problem here is they've come to this forum expecting to argue their point forward, but he just makes himself sound worse. And he's not taking the criticisms. There's no thank you for giving me this other viewpoint, and I will try and make myself better for my son.
All you can hope for is that at some point they see the criticism and grow from it, but everyone gets to live their own lives.
That's very true. Well, let's go on to our next story and see what you think about using someone else's pool. Am I the a-hole for letting my teenage neighbors use my pool regularly? I, 30 male, sold my business and retired about a year ago. I ended up moving to the south and buying a big house in a semi-rural area with a large pool in the backyard. The house is sort of standalone, but is adjacent to a neighborhood of smaller homes. It's a nice, friendly community, and several neighbors brought over cakes, cookies, etc. after I moved in. Usually, I ended up in polite conversation for 20 minutes each time, which I regarded as the social mores necessary in this sort of community. 2 of these neighbors were college-aged girls. After talking for a bit, they mentioned they were competitive swimmers. Apparently, the previous homeowner allowed them to use the pool for them to practice swimming daily, and they asked if they could continue doing this. They actually already had a key to my backyard, not to the house, which proved their case, and offered to give it back if I wasn't comfortable. I felt a bit put on the spot, but didn't want to be an unfriendly neighbor and also didn't see the harm, so I said sure, as long as I wasn't using it. Anyway, it all turned out fine. They started using my pool during the early mornings during the week, usually when I was still sleeping. I occasionally saw them out there and waved, but didn't interact too much. On the first Saturday after we spoke, they came over later in the morning, so I went out there to be friendly. I found out that they were actually way younger than I realized, and they were only 14. I freaked out a bit and asked for their parents' details so I could make sure they were comfortable with everything. I spoke to their mom on the phone, and she was very friendly and appreciative that they could use my pool because swimming is a big deal for them. I also called a teacher friend of mine about any risk I was exposing myself to, but he said it was fine as long as I wasn't alone with either of them, so I made sure that doesn't happen. Since then, they have been in this routine for a few months now. They come over in the early mornings during weekdays and slightly later on the weekends, letting themselves in and out via a gate in the rear entrance. They are very friendly, polite girls and, from what I can gather, A-type students. I have got to know them quite well and also chat to their mom when I see her. Anyway, this weekend, I met a girl from Tinder and hit it off. She ended up coming back to my place and stayed the night. Everything was going nicely until she saw them in the backyard the next morning, asking why I had half-naked girls in my backyard, whether I was running a Playboy Mansion type deal, had a string of women on the go, etc. I reacted with a hell no, told her they were my neighbors and were just 14 and it wasn't anything like that. When she heard their age, she said it was even more disgusting and I was a pervert groomer. She then got her stuff together and left. I still don't feel I am doing anything wrong, so am I the a-hole?
What a devastating thing to level on someone you hardly know in a situation you have no understanding about. I understand if there's enough evidence to say those type of things towards someone. I think I operate in the same way a lot of people do. You're innocent until proven guilty. So to have a mindset that you're willing to, again, level that type of accusation on someone so quickly is interesting. That says more about the person than it does the situation, in my opinion. I don't believe you're the a-hole, OP. By the way, congratulations. You retired at 30. Hopefully you've budgeted correctly, because there's been a lot of people that were retiring by the age of 30 through all of COVID and things like that and selling off companies. And it happens for a lot of people, but a lot of those people now are back to work because they didn't learn how to budget properly. Hopefully that's not your situation, but congrats again. At 30, a lot of people would love to be in that situation. But yeah, so you've retired at 30. You bought a nice home. You're in a pretty decent area, and you're complying to the social norms. You said you're having conversations with everyone, and then you got approached by the young ladies that wanted to continue to use the pool that they were using with the prior owner. And you said yes. You obviously gauged their age is way wrong because there's a big difference between 14-year-olds and 20-plus-year-olds.
Although nowadays with makeup and everything else happening.
That's very true. But regardless, even if they were college age, it doesn't change how I feel about the situation. They asked if they could use it. Once he found out their true ages, though, he did the proper thing. He contacted the parents, has a relationship with them as well. In my mind, why would he be in the wrong, and why would he be leveled with those type of accusations? That's terrible. So, no, P, you're not the a-hole. It sounds like those young ladies are appreciative that you're letting them continue to practice. Having access to pools, it can be difficult for some people. He says he's in a rural part of the South. Who knows if there's a community pool that they get to use outside of, I'm assuming they're probably swimming for the school they're attending.
Correct.
So to have that access to a pool is, you're giving them a chance to get better at their craft. Hopefully they go on into some programs or college, get a scholarship through swimming. You have no idea the multiplier you're having on their lives as far as academically.
Just to provide some information that our OP gave us in the comment section, that both the girls come from single parent homes. And one of the reasons why the girls don't go to a public pool is due to no one being able to take them there. So this truly is a convenience and a blessing all at the same time.
And that's all I'm seeing it as. But OP, know that you're in the right, and know that you're actually doing something that's beneficial towards them and their futures. Now knowing the whole thing about not being able to get to a pool, I was just assuming that I'm from rural South America. Where I grew up, there wasn't public pools. So not everyone has the access just to that. So good for you. Keep being a good person, and don't let other jaded people jade you from being a good person.
The consensus on Reddit is our OP's not the a-hole. Now, for many Redditors, they said, look, you're not doing anything wrong in this day and age. Really, go get a lawyer's opinion. It's not enough to just CYA, especially if you're dealing with potential insurance. And if something should happen to those girls on the property, see what you need to make sure that you are covered. Maybe even make a written agreement with the girl's parents in case anything does happen. The last thing that you want to do is be liable for any accidents that are out of your control. Additionally, many Redditors asked, look, do you have cameras so that you can make sure that they're not doing anything illegal on your property, just in case? Our OP says that they do have cameras, but he doesn't believe any of them point at the pool, just at the entrances like the front door. Now, I would like to highlight one Redditor's viewpoint on this. And they say, look, OP, you really need to work on explaining yourself better to people, because essentially saying, those are 14-year-old girls swimming in my pool isn't a good look across the board. Instead, what you should have said is, those are the neighbor kids training for their actual swim meet, and their parents asked if they could use my pool. That would have been a lot better than just saying that you have minors essentially coming in and out of your home, and who knows how other people are going to take that. But OP should really work on how they explain themselves to others, especially when it comes to situations that can get very skewed. I do find it great because our OP responded to that and said, that is very noted. Thank you for the feedback on that. And I guess for me, it comes back to everybody's got their split judgment, especially when it comes to situations that are out of the norm and that can get very twisted. I think our OP is doing a great thing. I can't tell you how many people would say no, because it is very true. Our OP could be liable for any accidents.
Sure.
They could be accused of anything. It would be hard for him to prove his innocence. Should anything be pushed forth, it's in this world, there's a lot of people that cry wolf, and you don't know who's actually a victim versus who's using the title of victim. And that is just a harsh reality of what we have to deal with in our day and age. The one thing that I can say, and I have always lived by this, CYA, not just professionally, but also personally. If someone's on your property, they're using your stuff, make sure that you are protected. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. I hate that we have to live in that kind of environment, in that sort of atmosphere. You can do kind things, but I can't tell you how many people would take advantage of that and would twist it. And that's just the sad reality that we live in.
I agree with you. That's a good aspect to make sure you look at. I didn't even cover that. That's very important. Make sure legally that you're making sure that you have your I's dotted and T's crossed.
It doesn't mean that anything perverted is going to happen, but it doesn't mean that anything else might not.
Sure.
Well, let's go on to our next story and see what you think about an unchristian thief. Am I the a-hole for calling my uncle an unchristian thief to his own son? I, 25 female, have lived with my boyfriend, 25 male, for 3 years now. We are way too broke to consider marriage with the cost of rings and a wedding, which we want. My mom's side of the family is very religious, so much so that my cousin, 28 male, got married to a pastor, 28 female, at 24 years old when they could move in together because otherwise it's taboo. My mom recently wedded her new husband, and my cousin and his wife were invited to the wedding. They took this opportunity to ask me when I'd get married. They weren't mean about it, but I knew they were uncomfortable at the idea of my living situation. Here's the history. My gran died and left her thriving multi-million farm split between her son, my uncle and cousin's father, and daughter, my mom. My uncle had been on the farm working in place of my grandfather who had died a few years before my gran, while my mom had decided to study further and had children in the city. So my uncle took exception to the fact that my mom got any of the property and threatened to sue my mom. My mom, 29 at the time, while her brother was 41, was naive and broke and in mourning and didn't want this fight, so she forfeited her portion of the inheritance. My uncle promptly sold the farm for a fortune and moved to the coast to retire at 45. And he paid for the extravagant marriage of my cousin and his pastor wife. So when they asked when I'm getting married, They asked as if money couldn't be a deciding factor when I laughed it off the first time and told them I'm just too broke to get married. My uncle had also just bought them their first house after they moved out of the apartment he bought for them. So when they said money isn't a good reason as a Christian to live with my boyfriend while we still aren't married, I gave them another answer, which is I can't afford to have my mom pay for a wedding and buy property for me because my uncle has the money our grandparents wanted my mom to have, and they can't use the premise of Christianity to make me feel guilty about my situation when they know my uncle threatened my mom out of her inheritance, then cut contact with her until he needed her help with his bad health. They were here walking around like good Christians with unchristian skeletons in their closet, and when that closet was clean, they could come pester me about my unwed life. I know it isn't their fault my uncle is an ass, but I can tolerate the privilege some Christian people feel over others a lot more than I can tolerate the privilege of having money and pretending it isn't a factor in life. But my mom was not happy with me. She says bygones should be bygones. My boyfriend is not happy with me. He said their privilege is not their fault. Am I the a-hole for basically telling my cousin his father's a thief and unchristian-like because they told me money isn't the reason I should be okay with how I live as a Christian?
What the spicy meaty boo? You know how they say it, some people need their toes stepped on. She got after it. Don't throw stones. That's kind of the way that works. Every once in a while, you get these stories where people just come asking for it. It doesn't sound like it was rude. It just sounded like this was right below the surface and they kept poking.
I find it funny because our OP's cousins are trying to lay judgment. And then you hear our OP say, well, here's my judgment on that.
It's pretty clear what happened. It sounds like your mom, or at least your side of the family, got robbed out of inheritance through whatever means was necessary. And that sucks. Understand, though, that I completely agree with how you're walking through life. You said you and your fiance want to wait till you can do it the way you'd like to. As long as you guys love each other and you agree on that's how you'd like to do it, that's all that matters at the end of the day. No one else's opinions on whether or not you're living in sin or whatever it is. And by the way, that's not just like a Christian thing. That's all religion across all the boards have something to say about someone. And that's even beyond a religious thing. You're always going to have people on every side, on all spectrums of life, tell you their opinion about how you're living. The only opinions that matter are between you and your partner. That's just how I feel about that whole thing. She's asking if she's the a-hole for telling it like it is when she was provoked in the moment.
Correct.
No, OP, you're not the a-hole for that.
As for our consensus on Reddit, our OP's not the a-hole. For Redditors, someone using their privileged position to criticize and judge others that are less fortunate makes them total a-holes. OP's allowed to call it out, and they weren't belligerent about it.
No.
In fact, some Redditors say that when they are brought this topic again, tell their family that they'll get married as soon as their uncle pays for it. I find it interesting in all of this that our OP actually said in the comment section, while their mother was in mourning after she essentially let go of their inheritance, the uncle essentially cut contact, not even a couple weeks after that. And that is very, very sad. The only reason why he even came calling is because he had a heart attack and was having some actual health problems. I detest those types of individuals. You would use your own family, you would use the people around you, and then would come back and abuse their kindness again. Because how our OP has explained it is her mother is a very kind Christian woman. The woman that would get used because of her kindness. And I wish her mother would grow that backbone that her daughter has grown. Strong lines there. You can be an exceptionally kind person. Understand that when you give and you give fully, you do it with no strings attached. But don't give to someone who is clearly ungrateful. I think it's that whole notion, and I remember my grandfather telling it to me once. Someone can slap you on your cheek, but don't turn your face so that they can hit your other side too. Probably old-fashioned, but I'm a little old-fashioned in that regard. Well, let's go to our last story. And I can't wait to hear what you think about this one, because it makes me cringe.
Oh.
Today, I fucked up by getting hit on at the shops. This morning, when I woke up, my kids were being hard work and everything was running behind. This meant I didn't have time to pack a lunch and only just got them out the door to get them to school on time. Now, I love my family, but day-to-day family life and approaching 40 can wear you down sometimes. Because of this, I had to nip out of work at lunchtime to pick something up. Things are expensive at the minute, so I went to my local Tesco's to pick up a sandwich and a fruit pot. I know, the excitement never ends. Anyway, this is where I fucked up. So as I placed my dreary sandwich and fruit down on the counter, the handsome young shop assistant smiled and asked, "Would you like to go for a drink?" I politely told him that while I was flattered, I'm happily married, and so I couldn't, but I must admit my ego was boosted, and this had cheered up my mediocre day. Well, it did, until he said, "No, sorry, I meant for the meal deal." The too long don't read? I thought the shop assistant was asking me to go out for a drink, but he was asking if I wanted to get a drink to get a meal deal and make my purchase cheaper.
Oh my. You found the cringiest story. You know, if someone waves at you, you don't know them and you wave back and then you realize they're waving to someone behind you.
I have done that before.
Oh, that is a fantastic story. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Everyone deserves having their ego
Just boost it a little.
a little bit. Every once in a while, you like to be reminded.
You're like, dang, I still got the riz.
Yeah, there you go. We're too old to be using that word, but yeah.
I like it.
That's what I was feeling for our OP. I'm like, good for you, OP. You know, we all hear it from our partners, which you should hear it from your partners, but there's something always different when a stranger gives you a compliment. It's always nice every once in a while, but to have greatly misunderstood the assignment like that.
I love that our OP is like, oh no, I'm flattered, but I'm happily married. And can you imagine this shop assistant's like, no, sorry, I meant for the meal deal.
Or it could have been a clever way to have gotten out of it without having to look embarrassed for asking.
That's also true, but who knows? Because right now our OP is feeling embarrassed.
That's okay. That's a fun little memory.
I would have to say that was probably, yes. I would equate it to waving at someone that you think is talking to you, and then you realize, oh no.
They're not waving at you.
They're just put your hand in your hair. Just.
We've all done that at least once. My cheeks hurt from the cringe. That's how good this story is.
You know how some people would just wave, but they won't say anything? I remember waving and I said, hi.
Oh, no.
So there was no way I could get out of it. It was really just,
oh, no.
Just the cringe me at that time in high school.
That's fantastic.
It was the worst. That's when I learned. And when I saw that joke on TV, I was like, oh no. Other people have gone through this. I'm not alone, but it makes it worse somehow.
I can taste the cringe in the air. It's so nice. Well, was that our last story?
That was our last story.
Fantastic one to end off on.
Especially considering how serious some of these topics were.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely food for thought.
Perfect. And then I ended it off with some cringe.
Love cringe. There's nothing better than a good cringe story. And if anyone has any cringe stories of their own, please share it in the comments.
Oh, Timstradamus lives off of cringe.
It's my favorite thing.
It's cringe for me is one of those things I feel. It's like I'm living in that moment. Even now, just reading this story, it's like I'm living in that moment and I feel the cringe myself.
Like if all I could do all day long is just watch people's cringe on social media and make content about that, I would. Because I live for that stuff. I
could not. I'd have to... no. I hold my hands over my eyes. It's like a horror film in the making for me. It's so good. Well, as our stories come to a close, don't forget, you see in the world what you carry in your heart. If you have enjoyed listening to us read and talk about today's stories, please rate, subscribe, and turn on notifications for new content. We regularly post on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we have our Feel Good Fridays on Fridays, and we have our Damas After Dark on Saturdays.
We appreciate all the support you guys give us.
Oh, definitely. I would just love to thank all of our Teachreons. Thank you so much.
Love y'all. And as always, listeners, we look forward to hearing your opinions in the comments below. What did you think about the stories today?
I might have brought some serious topics forward, but God, the cringy one always sticks out to me as the most like prominent one for whatever reason.
I think it's because no matter who you are, you can identify with cringe.
Have you ever had it to where you thought someone was hitting on you, but they weren't?
No, not that way. I've had it where someone was, and I did not know it. And then a phone number got exchanged, and then she called my phone, which I did not have on me at the time.
Damn.
Yeah, so it looked like I was giving her a wrong number.
Was this back when you were trying to get used to your flip phone?
Yep.
I remember that.
That's cringe. I had to apologize profusely.
I've had too many cringy moments.
Oh, and then before we go, we tried a new dish yesterday night.
Oh, yeah. It was a Swedish dish that translates to egg cake.
It is fantastic. If you've never had egg cake before, please go look up a recipe.
We'll put the name of the actual dish, but there's no way that I'm going to butcher it.
It's so good. You Swedes. I'm not sure if that's what they're called.
All I wish that I would have had was the lindenberries.
It was so fantastic.
Mm-mm-mm.
And remember, if you post it, maybe we'll see it on the internet.
Are you ready to finish that escape box?
We've had one sitting on the table for like a week, so we opened it.
Started.
Did about like 20, 30 minutes of it, realized that we were too tired to continue with this puzzle box, and then we left it on the table for like a week now.
All the little cards sitting out there waiting for us.
Time to get back to it.
Let's go.
Allons-y.